How many of you here were at the theater with last night?
Enjoy EAA and explore all that Northeast Wisconsin has to offer. Fly
The tribute that you saw, that wonderful film by Bill Whittle. In fact, Bill Whittle's with us now. This morning he put it on YouTube. The best way to find it is to search for Remembering Dick. That's all you need to say, Remembering Dick. And it already has 5,000 views. So I really appreciate you making that available, Bill, for everything.
EAA radio is your on-air flight instructor during
we have
Squawk 1200.
here
Host call
the people that were on all
and other special guests.
well, except my wife, she's gone back for my briefcase, but Brett Reagan, Bill Whittle, Dan O'Craig, and me were at Dick's bedside just hours before he pulled the plug. And it was amazing because he looked just as healthy as all of us. And he talked just as healthy as all of us. But he knew that he was in a lot of pain, and he didn't want to do another really painful night, and he decided to call it quits after fighting for weeks with an uncurable lung disease. So that was a pretty emotional time for us. The last thing I did when I saw my brother is I saluted him.
At 9 on
He
Hot Start,
saluted back.
Dave and Fast Eddie learn about NASA's X-59 supersonic
it
test
was appropriate, of course, to have his wife of 25 years, Chris Rutan, to spend the last hours with him.
At 10:30 on
But
Steve Post talks with Brian.
Dick, we're really, it really wasn't that long ago when Dick was saying, I think I can make it to Oshkosh.
Course correction, 3 EO talks with the folks from Miracle Year.
It would have been so wonderful to be able to show him everything.
At 12:45 on Squawk 1200, wireless mic.
Oh yeah. Sorry about that.
Aviation Advisory Board.
I'm using the one that can see.
Recent reauthorization in Congress. All this and more.
But anyway, I want to say a little bit about, Dick. I've been to Oshkosh since 1971. I think this is my 40th time here. Recently, partially because of my health, I haven't. It's been 5 years since I've been to Oshkosh, and it was 4 years. I was in Oshkosh 2015 and 2019, and usually I don't miss Oshkosh, so that was it's mainly because of my health. Now, Dick, and it's really strange that he was an absolute against smoking.
How they got the documents and
he turned down an offer from a company to fund the Voyager project because they wanted to put Marlboro on the airplane. And he after trying to raise money for a year and a half, he ended up turning down the only offer that he got. So he put together a bunch of volunteers, and together we did, I was real busy at the time on Starship, but I was taking my time going back and forth to Voyager, during the nine-day flight and so on at Mission Control and so on.
But let's back up. What is your background? My background in aviation. I started at the Air Force Academy.
Dick has been
pilot license right out of there.
supporting 71. How many years was that? That was 51 years ago, right?
Back to the Strike Eagle.
No.
Eventually wrapped up my career with the Air Force. Now I've gone on to fly with
53 years ago.
Private charter flight during COVID. So I've kind of dabbled in.
God, time really flies when you get old. But I think Dick started coming to
They're both
Oshkosh
incredible aircraft, but I have to say the Strike Eagle's the best.
in the 80s.
You also did
He
some
was
accident investigation
in the Air Force.
and risk management in the Air Force.
He was
Right. Yeah,
he
one of
was
the
shot
last
down over
assignments
North
that I had
Vietnam
was Wing Chief
in
of
F-100.
Safety for Seymour Johnson Air Force
And
Base.
then
So
he
responsible for
did
overseeing all the
service
aviation
sitting
safety,
nuclear alert
mishap
in the
investigations,
F-100.
and as well as the OSHA compliance.
He had on his wing this thing they called a
Big
science
responsibility,
package.
But it was an incredible experience to have a team like
You're not
that.
supposed to say that you're carrying a nuclear bomb.
That number of aircraft as
So
well as
it's just called a science package. And he sat there
Great question.
knowing that if
I knew I
the big
wanted to
war
make
started
aviation content.
and we were
Fascination with
passing
aviation.
nuclears back and forth
having
between
the
Russia and the
accident
United
investigation
States,
background,
that would be a one-way trip for him.
And then I thought,
He
well,
didn't have the
I want
ability
to
or
be
the
able
range
talk about
to
things
get
that I'm
home.
passionate about, and the way I want to do that is
And-
take my fighter pilot background
And he
experience.
tells a story that
share that fighter
that,
pilot debrief mentality.
they would give him a specific place where he was supposed to participate with his science package, but it wasn't a real
The channel right
interesting
now is
place
about
to
over a
him.
year and a half old, so it's just been.
And he wondered, you know, there's nobody else in the airplane with me.
I'm right around 570,000.
That is
Uh,
amazing. And it,
I
think
can
it
put this
speaks
bomb
to
anywhere I want to.
maybe that's the need for.
And if you've got a nuclear war going on,
Part of it, I'm sure, is people. There's always a form of
it's
curiosity.
interesting what some of those pilots would have
I
done.
also think for the
You know,
pilot community,
some
it's
of
an
them would have wanted to go back and
opportunity
see
to
if their wives and family were still alive.
So is that
But,
kind of, because there are other people. out there
Dick had
who
a
actually
phenomenal
freak outs
career. He actually worked for me, his younger brother of 5 years. He worked for me doing flight tests, and he was not a very good employee because I wanted these
Right. One of
very easy
the first things I
to
thought
fly
about,
safely.
videos from very
And I knew that some people whose all their flying experience was a Cessna 150 or a Cessna 172, right? And they're flown like this, you
I
know.
would not want to be.
They make a turn to final, you know, on the land.
That was in any way sort of disrespectful.
Well,
That's always been my goal is to
Dick,
try to
that wasn't in his repertoire.
convey the lessons that are important. Bring
And as you
but also
know,
be
Dick used
respectful.
to go to
Even
air
if someone
shows
makes a
and
mistake,
do
that's kind of the nature of the firefighting
really
debrief, you know.
good aerobatics and so on. He had put
The ego side, we're not focusing
a
on
negative
you, it's
G
your bad.
fuel system
It's
in
mistakes
his
that happen.
Long Easy. He put a different canard on it so that it had a good lot of lift in the wrong direction, like down, so he could do outside loops and so on. So,
You're saying this is something that happens.
and while he worked for me, he also did something that just was,
Even in pilot training in the Air Force, all the way through the fighter pilot community.
keep in mind, he was my
takes
older
it to a
brother,
really
and I was
high
just a
level
kid
in
brother.
terms of, you might go
Are
out
you
there and do
familiar with
an hour mission or an hour and a
California
half
at all?
mission, and that debrief,
The
you know,
tallest
lasts just as long as the mission does, if
mountain
not longer, depending on the scales of the
in the
mission.
continental United
There's
States,
just so much
you
to
know,
talk about.
excluding
You know, all
Alaska.
the data,
Tallest
data
mountain is Mount Whitney,
look for what happened
and that's the
cause why
headwaters
number 4
of the Kern River. And he would fly that river from Mount Whitney all the way to Bakersfield,
For most
and
private pilots
just
or
right on the water.
general aviators, sometimes
And
we-
about half of that terrain has
someone says,
steep
"That
cliffs
plane wasn't
of
very
rock.
good," or why were you taxiing so fast?
And this is
How can we
my
infuse
very
that?
easy was single engine airplane, of course, and its engine installation was done by a real amateur,
I think
me.
that's one of the things that I'm trying to do is with the videos.
So anyway, we
try to
fought a lot.
reach a much larger
When we were
audience
flight
to know
testing the 85% scale Starship for Beechcraft,
to champions of safety when they go out there and fly.
this is a business
We have
airplane.
a lot of people
It was
in the community
that airplane was going to replace the
experience
the,
that they're able to go and
King
share
Air
that with others, and sometimes I
as
think
a full-scale Starship.
because
And if you want to find out
to say to somebody else,
in detail
I think that's really
what would have happened if they did replace the King Air,
inspiring others to be
and in
just be
detail
a
why they
person.
didn't, my talk on Friday is gonna be pretty candid about that. I'm able to do that because Beechcraft is bankrupt. I'm even going to talk about probably why they're bankrupt. But anyway, the Beach, we call it when the Beach Boys come to town. You know, Beach Boys was a rock and roll music team then, but
how their go team works, how they get out there.
I don't think Dick was aware that the Beach Boys were in town, and he finished one of the test flights by coming along the taxiway, which is
And honestly, like I think
about half the distance to this taxiway. You know, right there behind our building.
sometimes a thankless job.
He pulled up and did a triple aileron roll in a business airplane.
It's a tremendous
So
amount of work
that caused quite a bit of stir.
And I think also with the
At any rate,
normally is about a
Dick
year
was an
before
adventurer.
the incident happening, and through the final.
He went along with a friend in a AN-2, which is a huge biplane, Russian biplane. They landed at the North Pole,
one of the reasons why
and they made a mistake by landing in a place where the ice was too thin, and it dropped down, and now he's stuck at the North Pole. And I tell the story that
all the facts might point to
they had to quickly make
I
a
still want to try to be
shelter
respectful of that investigation runs
before
its course,
it
because
got
also
dark.
gives us some further insight to the human factor side.
And that's normally what ends up getting
It
us.
doesn't get dark.
Right. It's all the holes in the
It
surface.
gets dark
Finally line
and
up.
stays dark in the wintertime, but in the summertime it doesn't get dark at all. The sun sits like this. It just goes around above the horizon. So, you know, it's kind of, hurry up, let's get our shelter built before it gets dark. So he taught himself how to build an igloo.
That's a tough question. You know,
And he said he enjoyed being stuck there so much that he didn't want to be rescued.
documents, a lot of it is shaped by the audience, either through emails that I get or on my
Dick
website.
also did a
Request form.
world record distance flight in the Long Easy, and the time of that flight was almost exactly the same time that Lindbergh took to go from New York to Paris in 1927. And it was 34 hours
About expanding.
in an airplane that had no autopilot. Lindbergh had no autopilot. And if you're solo in an airplane and autopilot, and you're up all night, and you get real tired, and you go to sleep, you're probably sleeping for the rest of your life. And he had that same kind of experience that Lindbergh did. That there's some creature out on the wing talking to you.
We'll see. It's great to be here, and it's great to be here.
I wasn't close to my brother as we grew up. If I was 3 or 4 years younger, we'd have gone to school together. We would have had the same friends.
The CDC and then the
You know,
A10 demonstration yesterday
and,
was incredible. to listen to.
But I never went to school with my brother, and I never had the same group of friends. I was just the kid brother, and
I just need to find the time to do
I didn't have any way to
That's
impress
my number one challenge
my
right now.
5-year-old brother
People find your website and YouTube channel.
until I was about
Pilotdebrief.com. Website pilotdebrief.com.
14 years old or so.
Look up Pilot Debrief.
I had a friend who owned a hobby shop in our little town of Dinuba, a town of 5,000 population. And he would drive a couple of us model airplane guys all the way to the San Francisco area every week or two. And we'd compete in control line model contests.
Hi, it's Harrison.
So I would come back with trophies. In fact, some of the trophies that I won were when I entered the adult class. They had a junior class where just under I don't know what it was, 15 or 18 or whatever. They could compete with each other. But I ended up getting some trophies competing against adults. And when you're 14 and you go up at a contest with model airplanes and you beat the adults, you kind of get hooked on aviation. and you know, starting then, it was clear that I wanted to be an airplane designer.
Along with EAA, general aviation topics and history, they also cover all kinds of fun, interesting, and
About 2.5 years ago, I finally convinced my brother to leave the desert that I spent 46 years in and to move up to North Idaho. Now, North Idaho is different than Idaho. There's a line across it where you're in Pacific time zone on one side of the line and Mountain time zone. You would think that would be a vertical line, right? No, it's horizontal. And we tell the story that you're not really in Idaho unless you're on Pacific time. But anyway, I finally got my brother up there, and all of a sudden, just like that, now my brother and I, for the first time in our lives, we had the same friends. We'd go to Quiet Birdman, an hour drive and so on together. We'd eat together. We'd go to movies together. And it was really the best time of my life to finally, in my 70s, to really be close to my brother. When he passed away, he did it. First of all, he fought it for weeks, even though he knew that his lung problem was going to kill him. It was not curable. They tried an experimental process and said this might work, and it didn't. So he knew for weeks that he was going to die of this. And he was a fighter. He was a warrior. And he fought. And he fought. He tried to keep himself healthy. And that was a tough time for all of us because we watched him get weaker and weaker every day. And
joined now by Aaron Miller.
The amazing thing about it is he finally decided that he had a horrible night. First of all, it wasn't just lungs. He was having stomach ulcers, bed sores, double pneumonia, he was having all kinds of things happening to his body. It was blown away. The guy that was always super healthy, never smoked.
That's right. It's kind of 3 stories.
His body is just shutting down. And when he put out the word that was so horrible last night, I don't want to do it tonight. So I'm gonna take this oxygen off, knowing that when you take it off, you're gonna die pretty quick, because they were pumping 40 liters of oxygen every minute into it.
Not really. I mean, my grandmother
Now,
was
those of you that have had cannulas, just a little bit of flow, you can barely feel it. If he took off that, he'd like to do this. He'd take it off and turn it like this, and it would blow his hair straight up. I think Bill made the comment that, what was it about North Idaho being, Dick was using all the oxygen. Yeah. One, two, three. Oh, good. Tanya's here. Why don't all of you come up? This is a group that before we turned Dick over to his wife of 25 years, she wanted to be here for the brick dedication, and she was unable to make it. So this group of people,
so I was close by. I just happened to be
we're surrounding
at the right time, and I was happy to do it.
Dick's bed,
I was
knowing
upset
that
it happened, and I was like, I could figure
in a
this out.
few hours
So
he's
my
going to be
mom
gone.
kind of applied to have her at Arlington
And
said they didn't let her in.
it was,
so I went to
to
look
me,
at the reasons that they
the
gave us.
strangest thing ever, because
Figure that
if
out.
somebody is
You know what, Derek?
in his last hours of life,
They
he's
are
usually in a coma.
wrong. I don't like it.
Well,
But
Dick was
in order to
smiling.
fix it, we really need
He
to
was
get
talking.
law passed so that
What
they can base it
what
on
was the
an
joke
actual
that
law,
you,
not just
I went
an
up there,
exception, which is what they were
I
trying to
figured
do.
my mission was
I
to
said, I don't
see
want
as much,
to
if I could make Dick Rutan laugh as much as possible during his final hours.
yeah, it was tough because if you make him laugh, he started coughing real bad.
Yeah, I didn't
But
care
you
about
did
that.
it anyway. You
Yeah, I didn't care. And
By the way, this is my wife, Tanya.
That's right.
I
The
introduced
program ran
these
for
guys
about
later.
2 years. It was
She went back and got something that I left off. Thanks for getting here on time. Okay.
So we were just joking with him for 45 minutes. The one expression, adjective I would use for him was he was just so sharp. It looked like if he hadn't gotten, it's like he had some sort of, like he just come off of an operation, and as soon as he recovered from the operation, he's ready to fly around the world again. I mean, he was tack sharp. And the only time he got sentimental was when he talked about his wife, Chrissy. He broke down just a tiny little bit there and said, I'm a little worried about, you know, how Chris is going to be after I'm gone. So I waited for a second, I looked at him and I said, well, you know, Dick, I'm your friend. If you want, tomorrow morning I can check Match.com and see if she's on there already. And he laughed until he couldn't breathe anymore. And during the rest of the time I was in there, he kept giving me this look like, you devil. You devil, you just gonna keep me laughing all the way until I pulled this cannula out of my nose. But he was getting so much oxygen. He was getting so much oxygen that just as a gag, whenever people would come and visit him, he would say, you want to see how much oxygen I'm on? And people would say yes, and he'd take the cannula out of his nose and he'd hold it here, and it would blow his hair up like that. It was incredible, really, incredible. And even when he took that, he needed that cannula just to stay conscious, and even when he disconnected the cannula, it was still 2 hours before we heard that he finally flown west. And it was the most dignified and brave and
Incredible. And how many
and inspiring exit I've ever seen. And I just have decided right on the spot that if I can go out of this world the way Dick Rutan did, then my life will be a success.
At least 3 times during that hour, Dick said, I am really glad that I'm in control.
She lives in Utah. Yeah, and so she's
I'm going to make a
still
decision this
quite
evening.
with it. And, you know, I'm excited.
I'm going to
Well, I
pull
had
the
the
chops,
pleasure of interviewing your grandmother.
head off to the west,
and also now not too long ago.
and it's going to be me that decides that, not somebody else, not some damn
Memory serves
doctor.
right at New Orleans is
You
usually
know, you don't like doctors if you're been in hospital for a long
so
time.
cold and chilly.
You kind of hate it.
Interviews are another 3 months. They're inside the trailer.
We had a memorial on the 29th of June in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho.
So nice.
And Dick, during this hour talking to us, he said, at one point, he says,
They were just were
if you
great.
guys have a memorial for
Again,
me.
from 1944 on, nothing happened.
So, last night was the
They
fourth
sort
one.
of got some recognition. And momentum
There's
started.
one in Mojave, one in Washington State, one in
Right,
Coeur
so
d'Alene,
like I mentioned, a
and
lot
then,
of
of course,
World War II
Cedar in the
people
Woods.
after the war ended, they
Says,
just
if
went
you have a
home, did their
memorial,
thing, and
put
didn't
his
really talk
finger out
about a
and
lot of
says,
things. And then in the
gotta be in a
1970s,
hangar.
the government was integrating women into our service academies, the Air Force
And it's
Academy,
gotta be
West Point, that type of
surrounded
thing. And also starting
by
formal
airplanes.
formal pilot training
And
for
nobody
military
there
folks in the Army and
should
the
wear
Navy. And a lot of
any
media outlets were
clothing
reporting this as
more
the first women to
formal
fly
than a
military
t-shirt.
planes. And my grandma and her
That
friends
was
were
his
like, "We did that
directive.
35 years ago. Maybe
So we had to do that.
So at that point,
But
they
the
got
memorial
together
that we had,
and
we went
wrote
out
a
and
lot of
bought
letters to write
400
each other 'cause they didn't have
t-shirts.
internet back then.
And if people
And
came
went to
in,
Congress and walked
dressed
around,
up,
they got a law
we'd
passed
send them to the
and signed in
bathroom to change.
1977.
But the guy who designed the t-shirt, I'm going to have him come up here and turn around and show the back of the t-shirt. It's the Missing Man Formation with Dick's Barracuda
And then, yeah, after
and, of
that,
course,
they
his
would do
F-100
talks, like I said, my grandma would
and
go to
American
Oshkosh
flag.
writing and do lectures, talks,
Dano
meetings.
designed
Yeah, they got more recognition. More people
the
learned who they
t-shirt
were,
logo.
and they were very inspirational. A lot of people find the story very inspiring. And then in 2009,
I had a story the day before.
who you know as the first female
I was sitting there in my office and I got a phone call, and it was Dick.
bill passed to get them the
Dick, how you doing? I've been working with him, trying to get him to various healthcare facilities and upgraded, and get him into the VA, and then I heard he's being transferred, so he was helping him with all his logistics and helping Chris with all his, getting things moved around. He called me up and just in an absolutely calm, matter-of-fact tone, he says, well, Brent, I've made a decision. If the doctors can't cure me, I'm going to pull the chocks. And it took me about 3 seconds to realize what he said.
Desert almost.
And it hit me like a ton of bricks. I was just
What kind of a shot
couldn't talk, started crying.
It's hot, it's windy.
And he was just like, yeah, that's what's going to happen.
But they had
And that
started the program
was
in
Dick
Houston, and for a
Rutan,
few
right
weeks,
there. He was absolutely in control. He was sharp as a tack. And
it was better to move to a place like Sweetwater where everyone
he was going to do it his way. He was the adventurer.
But yeah,
This
my
was
grandma
his
said,
big,
oh, it's
great
very
adventure.
windy,
He was
very
ready for
hot.
it.
They would check for
And
rattlesnakes.
so
They would check for rattlesnakes
when we were
in their
there in
beds,
the
their planes.
hospital room,
Yeah,
it was amazing because he was just absolutely
That's right. Yeah, especially in the Stearman.
Dick Rutan.
All across.
What can I say? But
Sweetwater's also home.
it was such an honor and privilege to know.
Were you there this year?
During
I
those
was
last
there
couple
this
of
year.
days,
I had
Dick,
it near the end of
yourself,
April this year. It was excellent. I did a talk about my grandma and books, and we had our first official air show this year.
we're searching for a name of someone who's very
Helping out
famous
here at Oshkosh
because he spent more time in the
Yeah, so that was
Hanoi
really exciting, having
Hilton
a formal air
being
show.
tortured.
We have had fly-ins before
and
with
Charlie
like,
Plum.
planes and the,
Dick called Charlie
the
Plum.
B-29 docking last year.
He lay
So
there
this year
in
we had
bed
some great plane steermen.
under a lot of pain, knowing that he was in his last
Then we
couple
had
of
the
days.
Christie Eagles, Next Gen Eagles
And he
team was
called
flying, so we had a lot of stuff going on. It was good.
Important people that he they wanted to talk to. And he called Charlie Plum. Now, are you familiar who Charlie Plum was?
Private pilot. He flew into Oshkosh last year.
He was being tortured in a Hanoi
I'm very
prison
close, but I had to take a break to come to Oshkosh.
because he was shot down over North Vietnam.
Take a break.
And for
And was the book and everything that's gone
God,
through.
it was like 1,200 days.
I mean, were you thinking
He
about
was in there longer than
When I was
anyone
very
else.
young, when I was a little kid, I was very...
Fortunately, when Dick got shot
For
down
whatever
over
reason,
North
I associated
Vietnam,
becoming a pilot with becoming an astronaut.
we were
Probably because
dumping
so
a
many
lot of
them were
fuel with a
pilots,
big
right,
fire.
Especially back in like the Mercury days and things.
And
So
you
once I
think that
kind
this
of
is
didn't really
unreasonable
want to
to
be an
do,
astronaut anymore, I thought,
but
oh, well, then I won't get
it was
pilot.
a two-place
They're like in my head, they were the
F-100.
same thing. And I've always been around it.
And they're both sitting there thinking, can we get to the water? Because we own the water. You get rescued. They even rescued Navy
I
guys
just didn't know what
in the water.
mission would be if I
But
wasn't
it's
doing
really
it as a
difficult to
job
rescue you if you go down in the jungle
the last
with
couple
the bad
years
guys.
was inspired and motivated to get my
And it
private
usually is fatal
information,
if
and
that
I'm doing
happens.
my CFI now, so there you go.
You're fully
They
immersed.
decided
Yes.
that
It is a great story. And
this
also
fuel that we're dumping, and you could just watch the fuel gauge go down.
Vietnam as well.
He
Yes,
says,
my mom was
we
a
should use
donut
that to
doll in
make some
Vietnam.
thrust.
There were, I want to say 627
So to try to get somewhere quickly, they put the F-100 in
and she
full
volunteered with the
afterburner.
United States Red Cross
Like
SRAO
flying
team, which
in full
were
afterburner.
supposed to bring joy
And
to
then
the
when it
soldiers
ran out of
overseas
gas,
who were in Vietnam, and so she served
they
there
were
for a
over the
year.
water.
They
She
flew
got
out to fire
rescued.
bases on helicopters with kind of board games and
At any
things.
rate,
They would talk to soldiers who were out.
we have another 15 minutes or so,
So
or
that's what she did for a year.
roughly?
A few
Yeah,
of them died
I'd like
over
to take
there.
your questions.
One of them quite in a tragic circumstance, but they are actually.
I know you don't have a microphone, but I know you can holler real loud. Just holler real loud.
Same as my grandmother. So my mom's working on that with.
When's the last time Dick and I flew together? Good question. He used his Barracuda to go back and forth with his doctors. Dick also suffered from, for years, from bladder cancer.
Congratulations.
And he was getting experimental stuff in,
Thank you.
down in the Los Angeles area. And he thought that that was the only place that he could do that. So even though he's now living in Idaho, he'd get in his Barracuda, fly to Mojave, get in a junker car, and drive hours to this hospital so they could give him this treatment for his bladder cancer. Well, I said, Dick, have you even checked? Do they do that here? And yeah. You know, he could drive an hour and get it there. But anyway, he went back and forth in his Barracuda. I didn't go together with him in his Barracuda. I'm trying to answer your question. Probably in the Defiant. He and I together. I've got most of my flying time in the Defiant home built. And Dick and I did, and you know, I would go with Tanya's folks, and we'd go on snow ski trips in the Defiant. I trying to remember, at least once, Dick and I together flew to Oshkosh from California in a home built airplane. Question?
Wait for the mic and we can record it for you.
Lion Theater in Camp Scholler shows a feature film every night around 8:30.
Do you think any of Dick's physical problems could have been related to his exposure to hazardous materials in building aircraft?
Test pilots at Emirates and the Dock Tomorrow night,
Did you hear the question?
Nicolas Cage and Apache copter pilot fighting drug lords. And Thursday, captains.
I'm not a doctor, so I'm not a good one to answer that question. I can tell you what Dick felt himself that killed him, and that is he took the advice of his doctor instead of the rest of us. The rest of us, first of all, everybody got COVID. Probably everybody I'm looking at got COVID. That's how you get rid of an epidemic. Is you have it, and then now you're immune to it. And you know, Tanya and I got it. We took ivermectin, and the next day we were no symptoms. We were fine. But Dick listened to his doctor, and did you want to say something, Tanya? Go ahead.
More details on the
Talk
service
right into the
can be
mic.
found at EAA.org. EAA Air Venture Auction.
I want to tell you about
keeping you up to date
Bert
with
and
all
Dick's
things Air Venture.
mother and father. Many of you may have met
You're not
them.
going to want to miss this
Mom
year's
and
air
Poppy
show. We have
Tan.
performances lined up from Matt Youngkin,
They
Jim
were
Pikes,
a wonderful
Kyle Franklin,
couple
Patty
and
Wagstaff, Michael
who
Goyen, and just
supported
so
their
many
sons
more.
and
There's
their
gonna be special
daughter.
showcases,
So
as
most
well as
people
appearances
don't
from
know
Parts of America,
that
the Rebel
Bert
Air
and Dick
Force,
have a
and
sister,
Army Snowbirds.
and she has
You
more
can line up at
hours
airventure.org.
flight
But if you can't
time
make it
than
live
Bert and
coverage
Dick
at
put
airventure.org/.
together. She was an airline stewardess for American for 25 years. And there was a sibling rivalry, is putting it lightly, between Bert and Dick. If Dick were here today and there was one microphone, the two boys would be pulling it away from each other, and they had such a great synergy on stage together. So we will miss that very much. But they both loved their mother Irene, and there was a tradition that we had when both parents were alive and coming to Oshkosh year after year after year. And at the end of our canard dinner, special canard dinner, everyone there would sing "Good Night, Irene." Does anyone know that song? So if we could end this
I wasn't done with my story.
You can talk about that in
When
private.
she interrupts me, she always gets the stage. So, happy wife, happy life. By the way, Tanya and I have been married 38 years, which is most of her life.
Whenever you end your story, I would really be happy if we could all sing "Good Night, Irene" at our end of this memorial.
Okay. Anyway, Dick, I don't know. He didn't talk to me about it at the time, but he listened to his doctor when he got COVID. And and he went and had somebody jab into his arm, inject an experimental drug. It was always experimental. There was never approved injection of a vaccine for COVID. And now we know, after, first of all, Dick knew what his symptoms were when they were jabbing his arm. And, you know, he didn't have other things to do. He always had broadband where he was in a hospital or assisted care. He did a tremendous amount of research. And this has been validated now with a whole lot of statistics that they don't want you to know because our government made us be jabbed. They made the military people be jabbed. They don't want you to know that more people died. Twice as many people died because of being jabbed in the arm as dying from COVID. And that's a tragic situation. But Dick felt that's what got to him. Okay, question.
Did you ever feel like you two were a modern-day Wright brothers?
Well, first of all, if you come to my talk called Heroes, which is tomorrow. Okay. It might be the next day. It's Thursday. Okay, come to my Thursday talk. I'm covering who are my heroes. Okay. And there's some very good reasons that I didn't consider the Wright brothers to be my hero. I considered somebody who did a whole lot more, who was a lot smarter, and I'm going to show everything that Glenn Curtis did. If Dick and I would talk about first flight,
In several instances,
we would talk about Glenn Curtis.
thick and it had cracks. So if you handle it,
And I don't know if you know this, but almost all the history books that are written about the Wright brothers tell a lie.
and you know,
They'll say, oh, we're building this big airplane and the wingspan is more than the first flight of the Wright brothers flight. And that's not true. That first flight was 120 feet, which is about the distance to that car. And it was an uncontrolled crash. And the Wright brothers fixed their airplane and flew again. And fixed it and flew again. And on the fourth flight,
special paint that
not the first one,
and apparently
they flew
prepared ahead of time.
86 seconds, something like that, almost 1,000 feet. And they together said, we've done it. We have demonstrated controlled, manned, powered airplane flight. Okay. So when you see somebody that says the first flight of the Wright brothers was 120 feet, that's a lie. It was a crash, not a controlled flight. Did I answer your question, probably?
Sure.
No, your question.
Okay,
thank you. Next question.
At some point during the project, he said, your program is late. Specific. People want to know who the manufacturer was and all this. And I'm like, okay, so I started doing it. And then at the end of the project, said and done.
Thanks. Where will Dick be laid to rest?
Oh, that's a good question. Dick will be laid to rest in Arlington National Cemetery. Now, I was a pallbearer for Jerry Gentry. I don't know if you know who Jerry Gentry was, but he was the Chuck Yeager of the 60s. Chuck Yeager did his phenomenal stuff, you know, for supersonic flight and so on, in the 40s and 50s. But the Chuck Yeager of the 60s was Jerry Gentry. And he was my pilot when we flew the spin test on the F-4 Phantom. Okay, and his wife asked me to be a pallbearer at Arlington, so I've gone through that wonderful process that they do. And first of all, there's a long line of that. It's only a very small chapel. The ceremony takes quite a while. They put the casket on a horse-drawn thing, and the horses carry it out to the site. It's a beautiful ceremony, and we don't have a date for it yet because it hasn't. There's such a long list, but it'll probably be at least a year from now. But he'll be buried in Arlington. Thank you. Next question.
Last year, come early because last year it was static, we were only.
Real loud.
Ran all the way from the flight line to the back to the red end. Was there a favorite aircraft that you liked to fly? I had never had any.
Dick's favorite aircraft.
Dick's favorite aircraft was always the one that he was flying at the time. He soloed on his 16th birthday, and he soloed, and then my mom drove him to DMV so he could get a driver's license. I did it the opposite way. My mom drove me to the DMV, I got my driver's license, and I myself drove a car to my solo flight. Not many things that I'd up my brother, but I remember that one. And by the way, by that time he was in the Air Force. He didn't even know. Okay, next question.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, we went to the Battlefield and the American Air Museum actually let us
Next question.
inside the front door of the museum. They said, and we sold 21 books.
Aircraft that he would have liked to fly before he died, whether it's built or not.
17,500.
Was there a dream aircraft that he wanted to fly?
You know, I think he really wanted to fly Spaceship One. You know, we had a rule at Scale Composites, especially after a prime owned a small portion of our company. A rule that you can't have a employee who is, you can't be, let's say, a manager who had an employee that was part of your family. What do they call that? There's a name for it. Nepotism. Yeah. And also, in 2004, Dick was really busy on something else. And the Spaceship One flight tests were done in just it was only about 7 months when we did all the flight tests, and we did on the summer solstice, 21st of June 2004, we flew it out of the atmosphere. Not almost out of the atmosphere like Richard Branson does, but we flew it out of the atmosphere. And that was a big deal. We did compete and win the X Prize. So in the year 2004, the world had 5 manned space flights. Not many, right? Well, it's because the shuttle was grounded that year because it killed 7 people. Of those 5 manned space flights in 2004, world manned space flights, 3 of them were set by Spaceship One in our little town of Mojave. You know? And it just it warms my heart on how quickly, or how such a small team, and we were able to do that so quickly. From the start of the program, Jeff Bezos, anybody who knows Amazon? Jeff Bezos? From the start of his program for a suborbital space flight, it was 21 years before anybody was in it and went out of the atmosphere. The Spaceship One, from the start of the program, and we got some money from Paul Allen. In fact, all of it came from Paul Allen. There weren't multiple investors. Of course, he was worth, I think, $20 billion at the time, so it wasn't really expensive to spend $18 million. That time was 3 years and 2 months from when we started detailed design. We didn't start building that day. We started detailed design until we sent Mike Melville outside the atmosphere. Was 3 years and 2 months.
2024, D-Day and the push to victory in the Second World War. Join United States Air Force Laboratories historian Jeff Duford and EAA staff Chris Hammond to discuss the timeline of the push to victory using stories and
Dick's going to give you the 4-line chorus of Good Night, Irene.
Okay, yeah, I am at
Bert's
the
gonna
point
give you
when I
the
need to
chorus.
rush to my, you do it.
Tune in from anywhere at
I put on my glasses.
This is EAA Radio News. A little bit of early morning rain in camping areas.
Irene, good night.
Rutan was the featured presenter Monday night at Theater in the Woods. He reflected on his signature technique for aircraft
You're
construction.
in my dreams.
Now, for years, my mom, Irene, would go around and count and log every Rutan design that was at Oshkosh. And they're not always here at Easy Row. Some are in a campground. And so she'd go around to the entire Oshkosh site during that week and make a log of end numbers. And from that, you can look up who owned it. Okay, thank you very much for your interest. The plaque is right down here. They put on it a hat that says Mojave Rutan Field. Finally, our little Mojave Airport has a Rutan in its official name. It says Richard Dick Rutan, legendary Voyager pilot, warrior, adventurer, patriot.
This is the first year in more than 20 that will not have a Warbirds in Review presentation from Bud Anderson.
So to conclude this event,
Was a World War II triple ace and part of
Bert
Warbirds
asked
in Review.
that we share this verse.
It has existed.
It's from Warbird pilot David Hadfield's High Flight Requiem.
It's not yet air show time at Airbench, but there's plenty of action at the
From
announcement
Dick
stand on the
Hadfield,
flight
from
line.
David
So
Hadfield's
let's
High
get
Flight
back
Requiem.
upstairs for more.
Fly on, old friend, to whatever waits for you. Fly on, old friend. Your course was always true. And now we understand there's a fair wind in the blue. But here, there's none who would not fly with you. And when we fly, we'll always fly with you.
I just wanted to hear it.
So that concludes the ceremony.